friends. Welcome back to From the Dark Side. I'm your host, Sherry, and I'm so happy to have you here with me today. Yes, you in particular. I just discovered that I can watch classic Forensic Files episodes on YouTube, the ones that aired in the late 90s when I was a teenager. I forgot about a lot of these over the last 30 years, and I'm ready to revisit some of them and share some of the stories with you. Today's case is one that aired on season 3. Before we get into it, I wanted to let you know that From the Dark Side is no longer on Facebook. I deactivated the page along with my personal Sherry page. Nothing's wrong, I just felt like Facebook had run its course in my life, so I pulled the plug. I might be back in a few months or a few years. I might not come back. Who knows? For now, stepping away from social media gives me more time and focus on these cases, and honestly, that's where I'd rather put my energy these days. Today's case starts with a man named Robert Sims, who comes home and finds his wife was unconscious on the kitchen floor. He runs upstairs and into their 15-month-old son's room. The little boy is sound asleep. He then runs into the bedroom of their 6-week-old daughter and sees his little baby is gone. This case is solved. Obvious trigger warning since this involves a small child. This is episode 180. The case of Paula Sims. We're heading back to 1989 for this one. We had the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Nintendo launched the Game Boy. New Kids on the Block were one of the most popular music groups. The Simpsons aired their first episode. Serial killer Ted Bundy was executed in Florida. Hurricane Hugo caused massive destruction in the Caribbean and southern United States. And in weird news from 1989, a man attempted to set a world record by driving his Ford Ranger in reverse from Michigan to California. He made it 679 miles before the transmission gave out. Paula Sims is 30 years old. She lives in Alton, Illinois with her husband Robert, their 15-month-old son Randy, and their daughter Heather, who is only 6 weeks old. She's still basically a newborn. Alton, Illinois is a historic city on the Mississippi River. The population in 2024 was 25,000 residents. It's famous in history books for hosting the final debate between Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln. Alton's most famous resident was Robert Wadlow. Robert Wadlow is the tallest person to ever live. He died in 1940 at the age of 22. He was 8 foot 11 inches. There's a statue of him in the city of Alton, and it's a tourist attraction. He's also buried in the cemetery in Alton, and his grave site is 2 spots. No one could be buried in front of him because he's 9 feet long. A little background on our subject, Paula Sims. She was born May 21st, 1959. She had 2 older brothers. Paula was known to be a bit of a wild child. She got good grades and excelled in sports, but in the 70s, when she was a teenager, she started experimenting with drugs. Her oldest brother, Dennis, had a lot of health complications and had seizures a lot, and she allegedly dipped into his medications occasionally. When Paula was 17, she was riding in the car with her older brother Randy, who was 19. Randy was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and wrecked the car. Randy died instantly. Paula was injured in the accident and suffered fractures to her face and jaw. Paula graduated high school in 1977. She attended a community college for 1 year before joining the workforce by becoming a cashier at a grocery store. Sometime between 1979 and 1980, she was introduced by a friend to a man named Robert Sims. These two began dating, and in 1981, they got married. We're going to fast forward 8 years to 1989. Robert and Paula lived in a home in Alton, Illinois, this nice little house. They had just moved here recently. Robert worked at the Alton Boxboard Company, which is a paper products manufacturer that employed a lot of the citizens of the town. Neighbors say this couple was very quiet. They minded their business and seemed like decent people. They had a privacy fence around their yard, and no one really ever saw them. They have a son who they named Randy after Paula's brother who passed in the car accident, and they had a daughter named Heather. Heather was 6 weeks old. On Saturday, April 29th, 1989, Robert was working a late shift. When he came home, he went in the side kitchen door around 11:30 p.m. He saw his wife Paula sprawled out on the floor. She looked like she was sleeping. He quickly realized she was unconscious. He ran upstairs and into little Randy's room. Randy was sound asleep in his crib. Robert ran into Heather's room and saw she was not in her bassinet. Heather had been kidnapped. Robert called the police and told them his newborn daughter is missing. By now, Paula had came to, and police began asking her questions. She was groggy, but she says she last remembered taking the trash out and it was dark outside. A man wearing a ski mask and holding a gun grabbed her and forced her back inside her house. She remembered the man hitting her on the back of the neck, and she fell onto the kitchen floor and went unconscious. This was before Amber Alerts, but police put out an all-points bulletin that a 6-week-old girl was kidnapped. They asked Robert and Paula a million questions. All Paula can remember is the man hit her and she fell onto the kitchen floor. Robert came home and little Heather was missing. Police had no leads because there's no fingerprints or footprints in their home that didn't belong there. There also wasn't any forensic evidence around. Nothing was stolen from the home except the baby. Something just doesn't feel right. They asked Robert and Paula if anyone was mad at them and would maybe do something like this as payback. Did they owe anyone money? Was Paula having an affair and this man showed up and took what he believed was his daughter? Neither of those instances were considered. These two lived a pretty uneventful life. For the next few days, reporters were camped outside in the yard. There was a heavy police presence around the house. Everyone was waiting on a ransom call or some kind of clue to pop up. Having a baby stolen from a home is not a common thing. These things don't usually happen. Most strangers who come in your house, they're looking for money and breaking stuff to try to find it, or they break in to commit a sexual crime. Police checked the bottom of the Mississippi River, thinking maybe her body would be found, but they came out of the water empty-handed. 4 days after Heather was kidnapped, a local fisherman named Charles made a gruesome discovery. He was at the access point near the Mississippi River. He threw something away in this outdoor trash barrel. It was previously an oil drum, but someone converted it into a trash receptacle. He noticed there was a black trash bag inside the barrel that looked a little suspicious and wondered what someone had thrown away. He picked up the bag and took a look inside and was startled to see the body of a tiny baby. The Charles County Sheriff's Department immediately arrived and had the body transported to the medical examiner's office. The medical examiner, Dr. Mary Case, determined this was the body of 6-week-old Heather Sims, since her hand and footprints matched the hospital records from when she was born a few weeks ago. Trigger warning: the cause of death was listed as suffocation. Dr. Case determined this because there was no trauma to the body, but noticed small linear cuts on the inside of her upper lip. This indicates her mouth and nose were smothered. So there was heavy police presence at their house for 4 days. Lots of reporters outside, the FBI is here. Everybody was waiting on updates. Robert Sims mentioned to one of the FBI agents something that was disturbing and puzzling. He said that during the time period that their daughter Heather was missing and when her body was found, he says he and his wife Paula had the best sex they've ever had. What do you even say to something like that? He said it lasted a long time and it was the best sex that they've had in years. Why would he volunteer information like that to an FBI agent? That should be the furthest thing from his mind. Here his daughter is missing and now her body's been found. It was a very strange thing to say. So, looking through Paula and Robert's home, something doesn't seem right. This was allegedly the crime scene, and there's no sign of a crime, except the baby is missing. There's nothing disturbed in Heather's room or anywhere else. It was like she was picked up and carefully carried outside. But again, no fingerprints that don't belong in the house. All the fingerprints belong to Robert, Paula, and 15-month-old Randy. They noted this house was very neat. Paula kept the house meticulously clean all the time. Not a single thing was out of place. One of the officers, who had just had a baby himself, was immediately suspicious because he claimed his house looked the complete opposite and that there's supposed to be bottles and packs of wipes and papers from the hospital laying out. I've had 2 kids and I totally get it. For most people, it takes a few months for your house to go back to normal, but whatever, maybe Paula was just extremely well organized. So the investigators learned something chilling during the course of this investigation. This was not the first time this had happened to this family. We're going to rewind to 3 years earlier. Paula and Robert had a daughter they named Lorelei. On June 5th, 1986, Lorelei was born. This was the first child for them, and they had just bought a house in Brighton, Illinois. On June 17th, 1986, Lorelei was only 13 days old. She was home with her mom, Paula, while Dad Robert was at work. Paula claims a man in a ski mask entered the house with a gun. He made Paula lay on the basement floor while he went into Lorelei's room and took the baby and left. Paula told police she managed to escape, so she ran to a neighbor's house and told them her baby was kidnapped. The neighbor came back to Paula's house to await the police. This neighbor accidentally let Paula and Robert's dog out during all the chaos, and Paula had to coax him back inside. Paula yelled to the dog, "I can't lose you too." The neighbor said the scene appeared strange. For example, Lorelei's blanket was neatly folded in her bassinet. Nothing was out of place, just like the house that Heather disappeared from 3 years later. After police got there, a big search took place using airplanes, divers, and tracking dogs. They called Robert, who was at work, and told him he needed to come home right away. When Robert got there, Paula told him, "You were disappointed in me that Lorelei was a girl, and now you're disappointed that I didn't stop this man from taking her." These two realized that police were listening to their conversation just a few feet away, and Robert leaned in and whispered something to Paula. Those words never left the officers, though, even years later. You were disappointed Lorelei was a girl. They know something is off with this family. According to reporting by Kim Bryant, when the officers were getting ready to dive in the Mississippi River, they put on wetsuits and they told Paula that now would be a good time to go with the other officers and give her official statement. Paula said no, she was going to stay here on the porch because she wanted to be there when they brought her body up out of the water. After Paula realized what she said, she corrected herself by saying, "My baby is alive and I want to be here when they bring her to me." 1 week after Lorelei disappeared, Robert overheard some officers talking about searching a wooded area near the home, and he told them he wouldn't recommend searching there because there was a lot of poison ivy, which was another really strange thing to say. I would go in poison ivy myself with no clothes on if it was my child missing. Police sent tracking dogs in that area without any humans. One of the dogs barked and laid down. The body of Lorelei was found. I found some of the original newspaper articles from back in 1986. They had photos of the couple crying and holding a missing poster of Lorelei. In an article on the Herald Palladium from June 1986, The reporter noted that Sheriff Frank Yoakum said this was the strangest case he's ever investigated. Lorelei's body was found just 150 feet from her home. She was very badly decomposed, to the point where they couldn't even tell if this was a male or a female. Part of the issue was that animals had already gotten to the remains and they scattered them. In order to determine that this was 100% Lorelei and not some other missing baby, first they did x-rays of the remains and determined this baby was less than 2 weeks old. They also performed a bone marrow test and compared it to Paula's. It was a 97% match. At this point in time, Robert still believed the remains belonged to a different baby and not Lorelei. Genetic testing was still in its very early stages, so I could see why he might have felt that way, but the remains were so close to their house. There were no other missing 2-week-old babies in the area or even in any of the surrounding states. This was definitely Lorelei. Investigators were never able to determine a cause of death at that time. It was just listed as undetermined. They also never found who the gunman was who broke into their home and stole the baby. Of course, rumors are now beginning to swirl. Many are wondering if there was no intruder and the baby was killed by Paula or Robert or both of them. According to that same article from the Herald Palladium, when a television news report said police were considering the possibility that there was no gunman, Robert and Paula got really angry and demanded they be given polygraphs to clear their names. Robert told reporters they passed with flying colors, but police countered this by telling reporters they both 100% failed the test. Without a cause of death, they can't charge these two with murder. The whole thing just kind of went away. A few months later, the Sims moved 10 miles away to Alton. We've got a dead baby and no one was held accountable. In 1988, Paula gave birth to a son, Randy. Nothing happened to him in his first few weeks, thank God. In 1989, Paula gave birth to Heather. So to recap, in 1986, Lorelei was born. She died at 13 days old after Paula said a gunman entered their home and kidnapped her. In between them, 1988, Randy was born, no issues. 1989, Heather was born. She died at 6 weeks old after Paula said a gunman entered their home and kidnapped her. Let's jump back into the investigation regarding Heather's death. Police have a good piece of evidence. That is the trash bag that Heather was found in. They determined this brand was called Curbside. It is sold in thousands of Kmarts across the U.S. When you tear a trash bag off the roll, it leaves a fingerprint of sorts. The way the roll is manufactured causes tiny artifacts like ragged edges and perforations to appear on the next bag. The force of ripping the trash bag tears through the perforation line. That transfers to the next bag. Investigators can sometimes match a bag found at a crime scene to the roll it came from by comparing those irregular tear patterns, if you have a roll to compare it to. I actually tested this today. I took a trash bag off the roll and compared the bottom of it to the top of the next one. I saw how investigators can piece this together. I had both bags laid on the table and I'm measuring the perforation tears with a ruler. I was waiting for my husband to walk in and wonder what the heck I was doing. Police were able to match the trash bag up exactly to the next one in line on a roll of trash bags in the Sims house. They also found these trash bags had a slight defect on them and were produced at the same time stamp as each other on the manufacturing line. This trash bag that Heather's body was found in 100% came from the Sims home. The most likely suspect is Paula. Robert had an alibi. He was at work. He's got dozens of people at the factory who can vouch for him, and he's got a stamped time card. I don't believe Robert killed Heather. He may have had knowledge that Paula did it, but I don't think he directly caused her death. It's also very unlikely that a gunman took their daughter. then waited 3 years and decided to do it again to the exact same family. Something the medical examiner determined was that although Heather had been dead for a few days when she was found, her body appeared to be very well preserved. She looked almost like a sleeping baby when she was found. Why hadn't she decomposed? They determined that after Heather was killed, Paula took her body to her parents' home. Her parents were away on vacation. There she stuck Heather's body in the freezer. A few days later, Paula went back and got it. She drove it to an area near the Mississippi River. She found a trash can and placed the trash bag in it. Imagine if Paula's parents came home early from their trip and opened the freezer and their granddaughter's body was in it. That sounds like a nightmare scenario. It amazes me that all of this was happening while police were posted up at the Sims home. The medical examiner who performed Heather's autopsy, Dr. Mary Case, she was the chief medical examiner of St. Louis and St. Charles County. So she has a dual profession. She also specializes in traumatic brain injuries. Paula claimed the gunman did a karate chop motion to the back of her neck, and that's what caused her to lose consciousness. Dr. Case determined this wouldn't have caused Paula to lose consciousness and caused amnesia like Paula claimed. The emergency room doctor who saw Paula the night Heather was, air quotes, kidnapped, said that Paula wouldn't sign a paper to let them access her medical records. She's up and walking around and her vitals were good and pupils weren't dilated. She does have a red mark on her neck, but she had been rubbing it for over an hour. 2 hours later, she finally mentions her daughter by saying, "I just want Heather found." With no evidence of a traumatic brain injury, the doctor gave her an ice pack for her neck and some Tylenol and sent her on her way. This is a personal opinion of mine. I think most of us parents, if we were in Paula's shoes and this kidnapping really did happen, we would have to be heavily sedated in a hospital bed. I would have to be unconscious or I'd be screaming and crying and having anxiety attacks. On June 30th, 1989, Paula was arrested at her parents' home and charged with first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and concealing a homicide in regards to her daughter Heather. She was considered a suspect in her daughter Lorelei's death, but she wasn't charged. Robert is considered a suspect in both girls' deaths, but police didn't have enough evidence to charge him since he was at work. Robert had a solid alibi. He did stand by his wife at first, but later changed his mind. Paula was convicted and sentenced to life in prison at the Dwight Correctional Center without the possibility of parole. She got really lucky since the district attorney was pursuing the death penalty. 2 years after her conviction, she admitted to killing both girls. She claimed she held Lorelei underwater for several minutes and she suffocated Heather. In August 1990, Robert filed for divorce. I know some may be wondering what happened to Randy, who was just 15 months old. He went to live with his grandparents, but eventually his dad, Robert, was given full custody. I'll get into what happened to Randy once he grew up shortly. According to reporting by Kim Bryant, Randy going to live with his grandparents for a short bit was more traumatic to Paula and Robert than the deaths of both daughters. So what was the motive here? We've got 2 little girls who were killed by their mother at just 13 days and 6 weeks old. We've got a little boy in the middle who this didn't happen to. What was the reason? Investigators learned that this family, Robert and Paula, didn't want any daughters. They only wanted boys. We know this because Paula called Robert from her hospital bed and told them she was so sorry she gave birth to a girl and not a boy. Paula told another mother on the maternity ward she was disappointed she had a girl. Police said during those very early interviews, Paula was saddened and crying, but perked up and came back to life anytime they mentioned Randy. In fact, the first responding officers to Heather's kidnapping said Paula mentioned, "Well, at least my son Randy is okay." The day after Heather was kidnapped, the police were still at the house. Robert and Paula were playing peekaboo with him at breakfast and carrying on like nothing had happened. We learned that after Lorelai was born, Robert told Paula she couldn't sleep in their bed. He made Paula sleep in another room with the baby while he slept in the bedroom. After Lorelai died, Paula was allowed back in the bedroom again. When Randy was born, Paula was allowed to sleep in the bedroom. They were happy they had their boy and they treated him like royalty. When Heather was born, Paula was asked to sleep in another room with the baby. After Heather went missing, she was no longer exiled from the bedroom and allowed to sleep in there again, and apparently they were having the best sex they've ever had. Robert said this was because he wanted his rest and he didn't want to have to deal with his wife getting out of bed and waking him up. But it was okay for her to do that when it was Randy, but not the two girls. So to get her marital privileges back, she killed both of the girls. Some family testified at trial that Paula and Robert were happy they had girls. They saw them taking pictures of the babies at the hospital. According to an article on Forensic Files Now, nurses who were present for all three births, first Lorelai, then Randy, then Heather, they stated that Robert was ecstatic over Randy, but didn't really seem to care when the girls were born. He just ignored them. One of Paula's friends claimed Robert was the strangest man she ever met. Paula testified that she was thrilled she had girls and even saved some of her old dresses and Barbie clothes for them. This didn't matter to the jury since she was still convicted in the end. Robert eventually remarried. Little Randy grew up living with his dad. I read that Robert brought Randy to visit his mom once a month in prison. Once he even asked her why she killed his sisters. Paula claims Robert put him up to ask that question. Robert and Randy became devout Christians. Randy graduated college and became a teacher at a private school. Well, in 2015, Dad Robert was 63 and his son Randy was 27. They were driving to Louisiana to distribute Bibles as part of a mission service. A drunk driver ran into them and they both died instantly in the accident. The accident was horrific. Their car was going 55 miles per hour on a bridge and it went off of an overpass and landed on its side on the highway below. The driver was a woman named Yolanda McNeely. She was charged with drinking and driving, leaving the scene of an accident, and 2 counts of manslaughter. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Paula is the only one left in this family now. Robert's estate went to his wife that he married after Paula went to prison. But her son Randy's estate, which was valued at almost $1 million since this was a fatal accident and there was a large payout, this was set to go to Paula since she is his only surviving family member. However, Paula did the right thing. She didn't pursue it. She instead allowed it to go to Robert's wife, who is Randy's stepmom. She sent a handwritten note to the court with this request, along with the request that both of Randy's cars go to this woman as well. According to reporting by the Alton Telegraph, Robert's brother Jerry, who is Randy's uncle, chimed in and he said he wanted a portion of the payout too. I don't know if he ever got it though. Paula appealed her conviction several times by claiming it was postpartum depression mixed with postpartum psychosis. Her lawyers state that Paula is a model inmate who is not a threat to anyone since she no longer has postpartum issues. It's been close to 40 years since she last gave birth. The postpartum issues have worn off by now. She's in her 60s and did eventually have her tubes tied so she could never give birth again, so there's zero chance of her reoffending. Her lawyer told the St. Louis Dispatch, "She's not an evil person. She's a person who suffered from mental illness, and that mental illness is gone." He went on to say there's not a day that goes by that Paula doesn't think about how horrific her crimes were and when she doesn't feel responsibility and remorse and shame for her acts. Paula eventually was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole. All of her appeals were denied, though, until 2021. In October 2021, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker granted clemency to Paula. She was reviewed by the parole board, who decided she was no longer a threat to any children. The state's attorney greatly opposed this, but Paula walked out of the prison a free woman after serving over 30 years. The latest I can find is that she moved to Alabama. She works as a dog groomer, and her case was officially closed in 2024. I know postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis is a real thing. According to the Postpartum Support International's website, it occurs in 1 to 2 out of 1,000 deliveries. I don't know enough about it to give an expert opinion, so I won't even attempt to do that. I don't know anyone who has ever shared with me about their experience with postpartum depression. I never had to deal with it with either of my kids, but I do know it is a real thing. Luckily, there are resources out there to help if you are experiencing this. We don't know if Paula really was experiencing this. She claims she was, but we also know her husband was mad at her for giving birth to girls instead of boys, and she wanted to please him. If they were so adamant that they didn't want girls, which I don't understand why, then why not just leave the child at a hospital or a police station? Or why not put them up for adoption? There's plenty of people who would be willing to adopt a perfectly healthy newborn. There were alternatives to murder. Randy was Paula and Robert's pride and joy. Obviously, it's wonderful that she didn't kill him too, and I'm glad he had a semi-normal life with his dad and stepmom until his death at age 27. I don't believe Robert Sims physically killed his daughters, but I think he had knowledge that his wife did it. Robert was always a suspect, but he was never charged in connection with their deaths. I think he's a narcissist and incredibly sexist. I also feel like he's guilty of something in those two deaths. I just don't know what it is. Maybe he planted the idea in Paula's head. We will never know. But I think he placed no value on either of those girls' lives. I'm open to people getting second chances, but these were two murdered children, and they didn't happen on the same day. They were 3 years apart. Randy was spared since he was a boy. I thought it was interesting that Robert, Randy, Heather, and Lorelai are all buried at the Woodland Hills Cemetery, and all 4 graves are together and share a headstone with their names on it. So the headstone used to have Paula's name on it, so when she died, she would be buried with her husband and daughters, but her name was removed and replaced with Randy's. Rest in peace to Lorelai Sims, Heather Sims, and Randy Sims. That's it for this week, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, and much love to you all.